Taking the time, I want to give you an update on some of the financial dynamics that the city is facing, a little bit about how we got here and where we will go from here. I just want to say as an opener, I know that this city has faced difficult challenges before. And in each one of those moments, we've come through those challenges stronger. And what we can see right now is we are very proud of the ways in which this city is making incredibly important progress. If you look at everything from our work on public safety, where we recently announced a historic 58% drop in the homicide rate year over year. If you look at our continued progress on homelessness, we're now 83% reductions in family homelessness, the largest American city to end the cycle of street homelessness for veterans. If you look at the planned reopening of downtown next week, where 16th Street will be open and alive, we see businesses returning, residents returning, sales tax returning. There are great reasons for optimism. And there are great reasons to believe that when this city faces hard challenges head on, we come out the other side better. So with that context, let me share with you a little about where the city is right now in terms of the financial outlook for the road ahead. I will lead with the important points to start on. What we know right now is we are seeing structural financial challenges in the city that are true around the state and around the country. That looks like both economic downturn and flattening revenue. And in addition to that, we also see steady and unsustainable growth in government costs. And I want to talk about both of these dynamics at the same time. The result of that, as I'll walk you through, is that means we have in 2025 about a $50 million revenue gap, and heading into 2026, about a $200 million projected deficit to manage. This is going to require structural change. I want to talk to you about that, but let me first tell you how we got here. Go to the next slide. When you look first at the challenges around economic downturn, and these are items that are not news to you because you write them every day, but I think they're very important for residents to see. This right here is the Consumer Sentiment Index. This is how confident do regular folks feel about spending money. Are you going to buy a new refrigerator right now? Are you going to take your family on summer vacation? Are you going to go out to dinner tomorrow night with your kids and your cousins who are in town? What you see here is that the consumer sentiment right now is twice as low as it was the day that the world closed and the COVID pandemic began in March of 2020. What you will notice is this is right now the third lowest that this rate has ever been in the last 75 years of American life. You have to go back to the 2008 recession. You have to go back to Black Monday in 1980s to be able to see this level of dropped consumer confidence. And what you see is not just that it's dropping, but it's dropping precipitously. If you look at the slope of this line from Jan 25 to April of 25, it is as steep as the night you were watching the Nuggets game in March of 2020 and Rudy Gobert came out, and the next day everything shut down and you could no longer send your kids to school or even press unleaded or leaded at the gas station pump because you were worried about contamination. That is the scale of the drop. That is the depth of the concern from consumers. And what we see is that changing dramatically since January of this year. Next slide. The same is true on our business confidence right here in Colorado. If you run a restaurant or you run a retail store or you run a construction company, how confident are you to hire new people, to invest in new programs? And what you'll see here also, this is at its lowest rate in the last 15 years along with COVID. This and COVID were the two moments where you found businesses that saying, just not sure I feel confident enough that I'll have a steady income going forward. I talked to a restaurant owner this week who said the same thing, beloved restaurant, who said, I am just not sure I'll be able to keep my doors open. I said, why is that? She said, well, just this week I got a 15% increase in just my alcohol bill from my alcohol supplier. And I said, even if that's domestic alcohol, she said, it doesn't matter. If the glass and steel that makes the container that alcohol comes in is still subject to increased costs, that's going to drive up my bottom line. So we know this is a profound challenge. Next slide. We also know this is what we see in cities and states around the country right now. Obviously, the state of Colorado just got through managing a $1 billion budget gap. We see cities around the country with $1, $2, $3 billion budget deficits. You see those in red cities and blue cities, in red states and blue states. This is the fundamental dynamics of a country that is worried about the economic forecast and is stopping spending as a result. We saw that beginning in the second half of 2024, as many Americans were watching an uncertain presidential election, that spending began to slow. And then when it hit 2025, you saw that spending collapse in the graph that you just saw. Next slide. And I'm just going to name, by the way, that this is probably an unusual press conference, that I'm going into full teacher mode here, because I think the facts of these details matter tremendously in terms of where the city is and how we got here. And so I appreciate your patience in sticking through it, because the details are very important. Combined with that economic downturn, you have real challenges around flattening revenue. So next slide. So this is what the city's revenue growth looks like over the last 15 years. What you can see is over the last roughly 15 years, revenue has grown about 75%. That means it's grown steadily at about 5% average revenue growth every single year. And that works because when your revenues go up about 5% a year, generally your costs do too. You have increased costs of contracts, you have increased costs of healthcare, you have pay increases for employees. All of those things generally drive up the cost of any organization. So when your revenues go up at that rate, you keep pace. What you'll see in the last 2 years is going from that 5% average revenue growth. We saw already in 2024 concerns about that slowing, because in the second half of the year, we saw significant drops as uncertainty emerged about the presidential election. And so what was a 5% average growth dropped to 2% in 2024. We predicted conservatively we'd be about 3% revenue growth going into 2025, assuming it wouldn't be nearly as good as the average 5% years, but would be a steady recovery. Instead of a 3% revenue growth in 25, what we are seeing is a near zero revenue percent growth. It's 0.3% revenue growth on the year. That means you've gone from 5% revenue growth year over year to near zero. That flattening is what accounted for $50 million of gap this year. The only reason that number is not $100 million of gap this year is because our team already foresaw this and decided to already cautiously cut revenue projections. We did not imagine you would see the worst economic collapse in the last 20 years other than COVID in the first 4 months of this year, but that is what has turned out to be the case. So that is the revenue through 2025. Next slide. Now let's talk about an additional challenge here is the structural growth of government over the same period of time. Next slide. You'll see right here, these are where our dollars go in the city. About 70% of our total expenditures are people. About 25% are contracts and services, and some other internal services as a general part of the pie. Important to know this going forward. If you look at the growth of government over the last 14 years in the city, we have increased our total employee count by about 40%. We went from 10,000 employees to now 15,000 employees over the last 12 years. Next slide. In addition, we saw almost 70% growth in contracts and services over that same period of time. And next slide. That has resulted in total increase in expenditures of 83%. We have nearly doubled the size of the government over the last 12 years. But the challenge, if you remember both slides, is our costs have grown by 83% over the last 12 years. Our revenues have only grown by 75%. That means structurally over the last 12 years, we have grown the costs of government 8% more than we've grown the revenues. That is unsustainable growth of government. It is not possible to support that level of growth and the quality of services required at this pace. You'll see if you look at these last two slides, we were worried about this when we arrived. So instead of the 83% increases, we first started by slowing that growth to 4.5% in our first budget. And then last year, for the first time in more than 15 years, we actually cut government. We actually reduced the number of employees citywide, and we reduced our spending path aggressively so that we're actually negative growth for the first time. Even with that projection of negative growth this year, when you see the collapse of sales tax revenue that we've seen, that means this structural gap continues to grow. That's why if you go to the next slide, what the gap is in 2026 is now that $200 million number, which is a combination of that ongoing growth and then the flattening revenues hitting at the same time. That's a bit about how we got here. Happy to take questions on that at the end. Let's talk about how we get out of here. And so what are the changes we need to make? What are the directions we have to adjust to be able to meet this moment? We have to do two things. As I said, you have flattening revenue, you have increasing costs, you have to do two things. You have to both drive increases in your revenue to recover, and you have to drive reductions in your costs to make those two lines meet. So we will do both of those things. An explicit part of the strategy to solve this crisis is to invest in catalytic projects that increase revenue for the city. Talk about that in a minute. The second is we do have to fundamentally restructure city government to live within its means. That means we'll have some immediate steps for 2025, and we'll have some deeper structural changes for 2026. Here's what this looks like. So for 2025, we are going to invest in the things that increase revenue. That means, yes, we are going to make catalytic investments that will drive increases in revenue that do not rely on general fund dollars. That means when we talk about downtown reinvestment, National Western Center, Women's Soccer League, Vibrant Denver, not a single dollar that comes from the general fund. It does not displace an employee. It does not cut a program. Those are capital dollars for capital investments, and they drive long-term revenue that do come to the general fund. And so what you'll see here in this investment is that importantly, right, if you look at National Women's Soccer League, that's a $2.2 billion investment. That's 1,100 jobs. It's $500 million of sales tax revenue. That's critically important. If you look at National Western Center, right, this is one that is now at this point more than $3 billion of GDP driven by that. If you look at downtown Denver, a third of our jobs, almost 15% of our sales tax base is in downtown. These are critical investments you need to be able to grow. Here's the example I would give you. 1987, right after Black Monday, probably seemed like a terrible time to drive a significant investment in the city. Fortunately, Federico Pena went forward with building the convention center anyways. Turned out to be a massive driver for the city. 1991, coming out of an early recession that sunk the presidency of George Bush, maybe not a great time for a big investment. Turned out to be the exact right time to invest in Coors Field, which is a massive driver of revenue long term. Maybe our most catalytic investment in the last 15 years, 2008, in the heart of the Great Recession, was the launch of Union Station redevelopment. Seems like a terrible time to make a key investment in downtown. Those are three of our biggest revenue drivers in the city because we had the wisdom to invest in times when you have economic challenge. So we will keep doing that. That is the only way you grow out of the place that we are right now. Next slide. We also have to focus on how we manage costs. So let me tell you about what that looks like immediately for 2025. And these are all hard decisions. They're decisions you never want to have to make, and they're decisions you avoid whenever you can. We just met with all of our city employees to talk through this package before we did this conference. The first step is we will start a tiered furlough system for city employees for 2025. These are one-time savings that help us balance this 2025 hole. In 2020, during the pandemic, the city took 8 furlough days. Those are what we call flat furlough days, which means every single city employee, from the lowest paid to the highest paid, all took 8 days off. We're doing this differently because we think equity is really important. We want to thank Ben Sanders and our team for helping us think through this decision. What this will mean is instead, all city employees will take 2 days. We'll have 2 days where the city closes like a typical furlough, Friday before Labor Day, Friday after Thanksgiving. The other 3 to 7 days will go up by the level of income of each city employee. So our lowest paid employees will take 2. All of our mayoral appointees, all of our senior cabinet members, and I will all take 7, which will be the largest number of furlough days for all city employees. That tiered balance both helps us save $10 million and helps us protect those city employees that are struggling the most to pay their rent. We will also start a hiring freeze effective today that will run through the completion of the 2026 budget, which will be in September 15, at which point we'll evaluate what other decisions have to be made going forward. We'll limit discretionary spending. We'll reduce and restructure contracts. Next slide. But let's talk about how we actually fundamentally solve the structural challenge I walked you through earlier, which is expenses growing faster than revenues and revenues flattening faster and faster. Next slide. For us, this means actually building a government that is smaller, that's faster, and that's easier. And for us, that means we got to make it smaller by right-sizing our budget to focus on citywide goals, focus on core services, and focus on living within our means. It means we want to make government faster also by moving more and more government services online so they're easier for people to access, and they're often easier for us to provide. That both provides better service and also provides lower cost. We also know when I talk to city employees all the time, one of the things that makes government expensive is that it can be slow and it can be hard to navigate. So we think by making government easier, by both cutting red tape to make systems move faster, it makes the workload of city employees lighter, and it makes the results for city residents faster and easier. So I'll talk about each of these. Let me start with the hardest one of all. We have to start with the most difficult challenges is how do we actually right-size the budget to restructure to meet this $200 million need. And we will do that by focusing on still not abandoning or walking away from the citywide goals we've undertaken. As I mentioned, we're making dramatic progress on the areas where we're focused. We are not going to stop that focus. We're not going to walk away from public safety commitments. We're not going to away from commitments on housing or homelessness or climate or child-friendly. Those are all will continue to be key priorities. We're also not going to back away from core services. We're not going to stop picking up people's trash or providing the services they deserve. But to do that, we will have to put all solutions on the table. That means we'll have to look at reduction or elimination of programs. We'll have to look at consolidation of departments. And yes, we will have to look at layoffs. We do not envision a scenario where it's possible to right-size this budget without that impact on personnel. I shared that with our employees this morning. And we will work hard with our cabinet leaders over the next 4 months to build a budget that is smaller, faster, and easier, that protects our goals and our city services in a way that allows us to live within our means. We will also start an effort to get feedback from the public and from our city employees on what we can do to help modernize services. What are the ways we can take slow systems and make them faster? How can we make expensive systems and make them cheaper so that people's services actually get better? And then finally, we'll focus on how we reduce the burdens of regulation by cutting red tape and taking out some of those rules that make it harder for employees and slower for residents. We will have, you can go to the next slide. We want people to be involved in this process because the users of our city should tell us what's most important to them, and the workers in our city should tell us what's most important to them. And so on this QR code, which we'll send out everywhere today, we'll ask for feedback on 3 things. What are the ways you think we should right-size the budget? What are the services that are most core to you? What are the things that you find to be not most core services to you? Importantly, what are the ways you'd like to see city services be faster or easier to navigate? We know people may have pet peeves about what they find to be cumbersome processes right now. How can we take this opportunity to eliminate or reduce those? And finally, where are the places that we can cut and eliminate regulations that would make services go faster, which makes them cheaper? That'll be a big part of our goal. And so that is the way we think we get to a sustainable government. So looking ahead, hiring freezes will start today. We'll begin the furlough process June 1. We'll spend the next 4 months working on crafting the 26 budget, and we will provide to you all regular updates on this. This will be a collaborative process by which we do this together. So I think the key is we want to people that were listening, and we want your ideas. So you can go to the next slide and let me close with this, and then I'll take questions. I had a teacher who was a mentor of mine when I first became a school principal, and she used to say to me, Mike, there are only 2 things you can offer to children: truth and hope. She said, if you don't tell them the truth, they go out every day and search for a world that doesn't exist. But if you don't give them some sense of hope, they don't have any reason to get out of bed and go looking for any world at all. I think the same is true for our city. So let me tell you what the truth is and what the hope is. The truth is this is hard, and this is going to be hard. And the truth is it's also hard in this city to raise 2 kids and not be able to pay your rent every month. It's hard to watch your retirement that you worked 40 years to build to evaporate by 20 or 30% when the stock market collapses. The truth is it's hard when it costs $100 to take your family to the movies. That is true. And Denverites who face those hard moments every day have to find a way to live within their means, and they deserve a government that does the same. And so we will take on that hard truth. The other truth is this is what responsible public leadership looks like, is that when you have these hard problems, you face them and you face them directly. And you believe that these problems are things we can solve if we go out solving them together. And when you see that you have less money, you have to balance the budget to make it work. That's what every business in this city does. It's what every family in this city does. It's what this government should do. But there's also hope in this story, which is when you look at what we do in hard times in this city, we get through them together. We have faced hard ones before, and we have made it, whether that was COVID, whether that was a migrant crisis, whether that was challenges around public safety or anything else. We have faced each one of those, and we have come out on the other side stronger. Our city will do that. And I don't mean just me. I don't just mean the executive directors in this room. I mean when you go to your rec center tomorrow, the woman who greets you at the door will be taking a pay cut to do that job. The guy that picks up your trash next week will be taking a pay cut to do that job. The person that gets you a license at the DMV will take a pay cut to do that job. And they will do it with a smile, and they will do it with a quality and a commitment and a pride that will not change. I often say that crisis doesn't build character, it reveals character. So the hope is watch the character of this city to see how we respond in this moment. Which is, I think what you'll see is that we stand up in a way that says you have a choice in moments of crisis. You can either turn on each other or you can turn to each other. This is a city that in every moment turns to each other, and this one will be no different. And so I say if you're looking for hope, at the end of this process, if we have built a sustainable government that can meet ambitious goals, that can deliver core services, that can live within our means, that can build a government that is smaller and faster and easier to navigate, then we will once again show that Denver is the place where we believe that all our problems are solvable and that we're the ones to solve them. The city can do that, and I believe we will. With that, I'll take questions.
Mayor, is part of the problem that your administration is spending too much money? I mean, you talk about you want smaller government, but you're also spending $57 million a year on your All-in Mile High initiative. There was a proposal to give raises to the department heads, even though these people are already making six-figure salaries, much more than the rest do. So don't you have a spending problem?
So we are absolutely going to reduce spending citywide. That's going to be part of the focus. I think what's key to look at is we reduced the size of government last year and shrank it for the first time in 15 years, and that won't be enough in a world where the economic crisis is such that revenues are flat and costs are up. So we do have to adjust that. Let me address the question you're raising about, well, what about spending on homelessness, and maybe you want to ask about migrants too. But that's fine. So here's the question. The question is, all right, well, what happens to these priorities that have developed in the city? There are two that come up. One is the question, what is spending on migrants? Okay. I'll wait. I'm going to do microphone, and then I'll ask the question. Is it still dead? Is that on the street? If I just talk loudly enough, can you pick me up from there, or you were like that? Yeah, that's what it is. You go off the microphone up there? I'm one from all. All right. I know. Can you put them here? Is that one? Maybe like this. Right here is an example. Take this over. You all figure it out. How's that? Everybody mostly live and that works? Great. Thank you. Okay, so the question is, what about growth and spending in some targeted areas in the city over the last 2 years? How does that balance? So two things we get questions about are, what about spending on migrants? What about spending on homelessness? I'll talk about these two separately, but let me just say in a slide, what you'll see here is the yellow bars at the top are spending on migrants over the last 3 years. The blue bars in the bottom are spending on homelessness over the last 3 years around general fund for homelessness. Migrants is general fund plus a couple other funds because that was an unusual situation. But what you'll notice here is across 3 years, these two expenditures together are up less than $3 million net. So you'll see obviously migrant spending coming down significantly, homelessness spending increasing, but still net, both of them, they're about a $2 million difference. But let me say something else. Homelessness is absolutely an investment in the city's economic growth. So when you think about the investments like Union Station or the investments like 16th Street, what will not work is to get businesses to come back downtown or residents to come back downtown if we were in a spot we were 2 years ago, where you have the U.S. Postal Service about to shut down services in downtown Denver because you had 200 tents that ring all 4 blocks of a federal postal service. And so that investment is already yielding benefits, which is both fewer people are dying on the streets, 5,000 people are moved off the streets into transitional housing, but also we do not have any encampments in our city center. We do not have any large encampments anywhere in the city. If you are running a business in this city or have a home in this city, that is a transformational change that makes you more likely to do business here or live here. And so those are investments we have made. They have paid off. They have worked. We will keep making them, and that will actually be a key driver to economic growth. So the key is actually investing in the things that drive growth, and this is one of them. Next question. Sí.
Muchos miembros de la comunidad hispana dependen de programas públicos para el cuidado de sus familias. ¿Cómo usted va a afrontar esa situación si hay recortes? ¿Cómo va a afrontar para ellos para que tengan una mejor calidad de vida en lo que resta del año y el 2026?
¿Por qué tienen miedo de lo que va a pasar del gobierno federal o de la economía?
En la economía.
Okay. Así sabemos en este momento que mucha gente tiene miedo de lo que está pasando en el país y que sabemos que la economía está en tiempos difíciles y lo que vamos a hacer aquí en Denver es que vamos a seguir invirtiendo en las cosas que pueden traer más negocios aquí a Denver. Entonces vamos a poner dinero en nuestro bond y nuestros proyectos que van a crear trabajos para que gente pueda seguir trabajando y seguir trayendo dinero que ayuda al gobierno y también a la ciudad. Entonces vamos a seguir haciendo eso y también vamos a cortar los precios del gobierno para asegurar que nosotros vivimos en el dinero que tenemos y no podemos gastar más que traemos. Yes.
Mayor, can you just explain why the city can't use the millions of dollars in interest from the previous bonds issued by the city towards the general budget to help offset the potential furloughs and layoffs instead of going towards the stadium project?
A great question. I want to return to this because I mentioned earlier, but I think can't say it enough times. When we look at the investments we're making in things like the stadium or the stock show, those are capital dollars only used for capital expenditures, just to build things. So they cannot, by definition, be used to fund a program or a person in the general fund. And so these gaps that we're describing are just general fund dollars. And so if we take all those projects to zero, that would not change this budget in one way. What it will change is by using those dollars to invest in things that grow revenue, it will return revenue to this general fund. And so it can only be a catalyst to increase revenue. It cannot supplant any revenue. Capital fund goes to building things, general fund goes to paying people and programs.
But there's no way that money can be changed or changed to be directed to the general fund?
No, those are allocated, particularly those bond dollars are allocated bond dollars to be used for public construction projects. That's what they're approved for and designated for. So they can't be changed, they can't be moved. But also I would say in addition, we wouldn't want to do that for the same reasons I described. You want to build Union Station in a recession, you want to build Coors Field, you want to build the convention center. What we need here equally in terms of controlling costs is growing revenue. What you need to do is invest in the places that will drive revenue, and these places will drive revenue. Yeah, Kyle.
Hey, can you speak to, so like all these new capital projects, someone's going to have to staff it. And if we're looking at furloughs and layoffs, like once the things are built, how are you going to afford to make sure that they actually?
Yeah. I think the key is right now the investment on these sides will be capital projects. There will be capital dollars. They have different structures, right? For instance, the stadium was not going to be staffed by Denver City employees. That will be run and managed by an independent organization, so we don't have ongoing maintenance or staffing there. The stock show often is run by the National Western, and there's an independent organization that runs that separately. And so not all of these have ongoing carrying costs for the city, but they do drive revenue for the city. And so same with downtown Denver, the investments in downtown. A lot of those will be in building parks or in converting commercial buildings to residential, so we have more people that are present there. That's more people living, working, buying, spending revenue there. And so these are all drivers of income, even if they're not actual liabilities for the city directly.
Thinking about libraries that are in the bond or parks that are in the
Great question. Thank you. So on the bond, The bond can be both. Some of it will be maintenance of existing projects and infrastructure to make sure the city still works, so roads and bridges are still safe. And this is where the risk is, you can't stop doing those forever, right? What we're describing here, I hope I showed, is a structural challenge, which is costs are growing too high and revenues are too low. You can't balance that anymore on a one-time fund. So even the idea of, could we find 10 million to move this year or 20 million to move one year? We did that last year, but that doesn't solve long-term structural challenges. And so in the bond, we will look at what are the things that are going to be improvements or maintenance, and what are the things that would require new infrastructure. And when we talk with our team at the library or our team at Parks and Rec, we'll evaluate both of those. What's the short-term construction cost? What's the long-term staffing cost? And I will say that that is also part of growth, as you do prune and plant at the same time. You do want to make sure that you're both scaling back things that are not as crucial as they were 30 years ago, and you're investing in new things that are incredibly important. Yes?
There's so much here, from downsizing local government to the furloughs to layoffs. What I want to ask you is, how do you see this affecting citizens of Denver? What are they going to notice? Are they eventually going to find offices closed, services unavailable? What's the impact going to be on people who actually live in Denver?
Great question, Brian. Our goal is to minimize any impact on public-facing services at every step that we can. And so the challenge that all of our executive directors and I have, and our city employees have over the next 4 months, is to figure out how we can right-size this budget while minimizing any impact on services. We know it's probably impossible to avoid all of them, but our goal is to eliminate or avoid as many of them as possible. And so this really is the starting line for this process, not the finish line. We still have 4 months of a budget to build. I'll be meeting with our executive directors every month. They'll be talking to employees. We'll be gathering feedback. We'll be trying to figure out where are the savings here that least impact public services.
Mayor,
Yes?
You mentioned that you tried to scale the budget back for 2025. Knowing what you know now about how that still wasn't quite enough, are you wondering if maybe the city should have even more aggressively scaled back in 2025?
I think if you go back to these slides on the economic downturn, I think this is why it's so helpful, is if you look at where we were, we built this budget in July, August of 24. And let's actually go down to the next one. Actually, no, go back to that one. This one's right. So, we were here, we were building budget. There were some vicissitudes, but mostly you were at a steady state. We predicted a drop of this magnitude, which would have been dramatic. We did not predict one of the third worst drops in the last 75 years. I think we did not predict all of the things that happened in the last 4 months: tariff war, global trade crisis, stock market collapses. So that was, I think, why we were conservative. I will tell you, we are going to be incredibly conservative going forward. So if you can go, Megan, to the slide on the 2026 projected budget. What you'll notice here, if you go back one slide, Megan, it's actually okay. Go back to this one. So what you'll notice here is last year we said we're gonna say revenue growth is gonna slow. Instead of a normal 5% year, let's call it a 3% year. And we were wrong. It was like a 0.7% year. So what we are planning for here is 0% growth in 2026. So what you'll see is, see this bar? It's flat, flat, flat. As opposed to look at these years of revenue growth. Look at these years of revenue growth. We are preparing now for what would be the worst financial economic situation, which is zero revenue growth. And so the benefit is if we do anything better than that, we'll be in a better situation. I think we can't afford to not be incredibly cautious about taking a zero revenue assumption.
Mayor, can you talk about
Please.
About how federal actions are affecting the budget, including the $20 million the city's trying to get back?
Those dollars clearly do affect the budget. We're fighting to get them. For those of you that know, was talking about this was, when we looked at FEMA grants that we applied for, really the condition of the grant was you must use these dollars to provide services to migrants that have arrived in your city. We then use those dollars to provide those services. Now the new administration is revoking those dollars on the grounds that we use them to provide services to migrants in our city. So we think that's clearly illegal, a violation of Congress's intent and Congress's action, so we'll sue to get those back. That would be wonderful if we could get that back, and to go back to your question, that is still a one-time investment. That would help us solve a little bit of short-term costs in '25. It does not solve the structural gap that we're seeing without doing that. The most profound thing that the federal government is doing that is driving a change for our city is the collapse of consumer confidence, the collapse of business confidence, and the collapse of spending. That is the biggest thing. And so we can't control federal policy. What we can control are the incentives that make it more likely for folks in Denver to be able to spend and invest in ways that will grow the economy.
Mayor, why are you confident that these capital projects will drive growth? I mean, like with the soccer stadium, most economists say that, stadiums don't help cities grow economically the way maybe you believe.
Yeah, I'd say those economists should probably be unemployed. I think if you look at, ask any restaurant owner who's in McGregor Square if it makes a difference when there's a home Rockies game or not. Ask Brooklyn's across from Ball Arena if it makes any difference if there's an Avs or a Nuggets game or not. Or ask anyone that offices at Union Station if it matters that there's a fully activated, revived public spaces with restaurants and commercial investment that they come to work in or not. We see some of the dramatically higher rates of occupancy and revenue are disproportionately in lower downtown, not in upper downtown. Why is that? That is singly because of the investment of Union Station and the surrounding areas that have driven that recovery much faster than other parts of the city. So I think it is incredibly clear that these investments drive activation, they drive investment, they drive revenues, and that's the way we grow the city, which is why we're so committed to staying invested in those.
Mayor?
Yes.
Did it take a budget shortfall for you to crystallize that the government should be faster, easier, and smaller? Because the smaller case, some people might be like, well, it might have been a good thing in July 2023 to think small.
Yeah. So I think it's both. As you know, we've been working a lot on faster. When you look at our Denver permitting office, that was an entire investment in the single most problematic place in the city where things were too slow, and we knew it was slowing down business and literally driving up rents for residents because it took too long to build those things. We've been working some, so that was already in place on faster. We've been working some on easier. We had our Den AI Summit, which is a convening that SUMA and our team has led to bring technology developers to say, how can we make city services easier to navigate and faster? So we were doing those in pieces already. I think what this catalyzed is to fix any one of these, you have to fix all of them, right? To be able to make government smaller, you're gonna have to make it faster, you're gonna have to make it a little bit easier to activate. We'll try to do those together. And we know there were good reasons to invest in a lot of the growth we've seen over the last 10 or 12 years. When you have 5, 7, 8% growth every year, it's easy to think that you keep growing. But I think what we found is if you look at a lot of these years, there were 17, 18, 19 already, those years were running deficits. But the result was you had big fund balances that had built up from the boom years to help you could live out of fund balance. That's not there anymore. And so you have to really tighten the budget to make sure you're just spending what you're bringing in. So I think it has crystallized this for us, and I think that's what all of our executive directors are doing, is looking at how can I really focus on hitting the big goals I have, providing the core services I have, but doing it in a different way than I might have done it before. We think that's what families and businesses do, and we think we can do that too. Yes.
To your point about investment, you have sort of a coincidental silver lining in the street formerly known as the mall opening, right, as this is happening. I'm curious to get a sense, if you were to do no capital improvements, as you say, as you're planning to do, would the projected tax revenue from the mall, 16th Street, fill in some of this hole in a way that's significant?
I mean, we're very optimistic about 16th Street and its catalyst to revive investment in downtown. That was a big investment we made, a capital investment of almost $250 million over the last 3 or 4 years. But we know that just opening it is not going to be enough. You do need to be able to have more people downtown, which means some of those vacant commercial buildings we want to turn into residential buildings. That means we do need to attract and keep vendors there who will be able to drive revenue. And we don't want to take any chances. What we can't afford to do is sit back and watch declining revenues continue. So that will be one of our most important catalysts. We're excited that the continuing investments we'll make in downtown will also not be with general fund dollars. They'll be from this Downtown Development Authority. I mean, the best story here, right, is you think about the Union Station story. They started this in the recession, said, we think this might be effective enough to pay back itself in 30 years. It now paid itself back twice as fast. It's done in 15 years, and it's going to leave $500 million for us to invest in the rest of downtown for the next 15 years. That's what we think the investments we're making now will do. Because hopefully 15 years from now, a mayor will be standing here saying, thanks to the revenue coming off of these key investments, we actually are seeing real growth. Yes.
Are you considering asking city employees to increase their pension contributions
That's not a solution we've looked at right now. I will say I tried to be clear in this slide, as hard as it is, that all things are on the table. And so that's the thing we'll spend. You might be our first submission of a suggestion, Brian, to the website, but I think that's what we'll spend the next 4 months looking at is what are all the options? Which options save the most dollars, still deliver great services, and do everything we can to protect city employees. And so we'll look at all those, but that's not one I've looked at yet.
Mayor,
Yes.
is there a rough estimate of the missing federal dollars that are projected in this outlook? And then also, does the city have any money set aside for any potential litigation, or is that something that the city is kind of relying on the state to do?
So on both questions, the immediate dollars that we're contesting are $24 million of federal grants that we already spent dollars for. We promised to be reimbursed. They have stopped reimbursement. We'll litigate over those. That would just be $24 million one time. So again, that would really just help maybe in the 2025 one-time fund gap, will not help in the ongoing $200 million structural gap. In terms of litigation, we do have dollars that we have prepared to be able to use for cases like this. Often our own city attorneys do cases like this. And oftentimes, like in this suit, we have other cities like Chicago that take lead, and we do not allocate resources to the litigation of them directly. So where we can, we'll partner with other cities in the same position or other states so that we can reduce costs for our own city. Yes?
Mayor, I know the city has a contingency fund and a rainy day fund. How are they being applied?
Well, I'm smiling because I had another 17 slides I wanted to run you through on the fund balance, but my team thought this was maybe 40 slides was enough. I'll just say, as a short summary, fund balance is also a concern for us. So what happened, what you saw is over the last 10 years, when expenditures have been growing faster than revenues, the way the city has managed that is by dipping into fund balance. So it's sort of like we all have a checking account and a savings account, and you try not to touch the savings account. We've been living out of the savings account. But when you're seeing that every month you have a structural gap and you got to rely on savings, it just means your earnings don't meet your costs. And so that, if you remember last year, that was one of the ways in which we balanced, was to bring some money from fund balance. And that's why for the first time in a long time, we dropped below 15% on our fund balance, which is recommended. If we were to keep dropping fund balance, it would drop below 10%. The city has never in its history dropped below 10% fund balance. We think that would be very risky. And so part of the reason why we have to make these structural fixes is otherwise you're gonna just keep dipping into the savings account every year, and that we think that's unsustainable. You mentioned the second one, thank you for the detailed question. For those of you writing the details, contingency is different. Contingency is every year we keep a contingency for just that 1 year's crisis. That's about $34 million, and we spend it each year, and then it disappears each year. Fund balance is the overall savings account. The other way we're going to try to fill as much of this this $50 million hole in 2025 is by protecting that contingency. So that means we're trying to not have departments come in with supplementals or additional costs in 2025. Often there are unforeseen things we use that for. The more of that we can protect, the better chance we get to fill that 50.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Back to the women's soccer stadium, I know you've outlined dollars and where it's
Yes.
coming from, and you mentioned it as a catalytic investment. There are some people though that may be thinking, and maybe even some council members too, that say, that's great that it's gonna be a catalytic investment, but the stadium may not open till, it's probably won't open till 2028, and you need revenue now. How do you square with revenue now to get to the revenue that you hope to get later?
This is actually the best way to drive revenue now because that stadium in 4 months, 6 months when it breaks ground will drive 1,100 jobs now. So one of the key items is the actual construction and the development of that site is itself a job creator, is itself a revenue creator, is itself a sales tax and an income tax driver. So it's not just a long-term investment, it is very much a short-term investment. Of course it gets better when it's open, but for each of these, the investments now are important. 16th Street was a big investment while it was under construction in the construction industry. It'll be a big investment in the retail industry now that it's reopened. So both are true, and we want to keep doing both.
Last question?
Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about the airport? So the airport's kind of a unique creature within the city government. Will the hiring freezes, the furloughs, will that apply to those employees as well? And how do you see this affecting the airport?
Thank you. I talked with Phil about this. I'm sure Phil's here. The airport will also take furloughs. All of our staff at the airport will also participate. Every employee is participating, whether you're in a mostly generally funded organization or a special revenue fund, or as you know, an enterprise. So we are doing that across the board. There are some enterprises that will have different effects on the hiring freeze. I don't know if I mentioned in the hiring freeze. Obviously, hiring freeze will not apply to uniformed officers, will not apply to 911 call takers. There are certain mission critical operations that will not be frozen. And there are certain core frontline public services that if someone quits a month from now, we will have to backfill. If you're a caseworker at social services and you have a caseload of 80 people that rely on you, there are certain of those roles we'll have to backfill. And so there are obviously certain 24-hour-a-day operations at the airport that have to be continued, but they will participate in the furloughs. Yes. Thank you all so much for all of your time, attention, good questions. This will be a challenging stretch for the city, but one in which we are actually quite confident with the leadership of the folks in this room and the commitment of the team in the city. We will come out on the other side stronger with a government that we think is faster and smaller and easier to navigate, but that still meets big goals, that delivers core services, and that makes the city proud in how we handle a crisis. So thank you all for being here, and have a great Tuesday. Or today's not Tuesday. Thursday. That's how my week's been.